All right, thanks for coming, everyone. All right. I think we made good work of the pizza. That's excellent. All right, so welcome back to YBF. I think you'll all notice, those of you that have been here before, the room's a bit different. So I'm going to be looking through that window the whole time because I'm used to the screen here. So welcome to CocoaHeads. We're kicking off on time, which is really great. If you haven't joined us on Slack, you can invite yourself at slack.melbournecocoaheads.com. Got some stickers up front, and I'm live streaming everything tonight on YouTube as well. So welcome. I've got a little, the month it was, but it's really just like a few dot points from WWDC. Tell you who I am, talk about some upcoming events, code of conduct, tonight's agenda and sponsors, and we'll do a quick who's hiring before we get into presentations. So the month it was, which was the month from last meetup to now, I think it was 5 weeks. It's felt like forever. It's basically WWDC. So who went over, who was there, who presented, no. Thanks for coming back to Melbourne. Some highlights for me. I think they fit pretty well into these three categories. iOS 12 is all about machine learning, augmented reality, Siri extensions, and performance. Who's running the beta on their phone right now? Not as many. Okay, we've all learnt over the last 10 years. We've learnt.
No, it's actually much better.
Yeah, I've heard really good things about it. Screen time, I think, is a great initiative as well. If you have, I don't have kids, but if you had kids, and this looks like a great way to control them a bit more. Mojave looks great. I think everyone was pretty impressed with the name. Dark mode, I think Matt's going to do a quick talk on dark mode. And then eventually we'll have UI kit somewhere near the Mac or something like that. So that was the thing they didn't really announce, but I think probably what everyone was waiting for.
Too many of those now.
Too many. Xcode 10, I'm running it day to day at the moment, and it's super smooth, aka it's not any worse.
Good to know.
It's running really well. That's for a first beta, it's great. So I'm now maintaining 2 branches in what I do. One has got all the changes for Xcode 10 that I have to always rebase on top of it anyway. That's okay, I can handle the Git work. So I'm Jesse. I've been developing iOS apps for a while. I've worked realestate.com.au, RMIT, Bean Hunter, do some contracting at the moment. I've been running CocoaHeads since around 2014. Upcoming events, excluding tonight, we have Hack Night next Wednesday. Hack Night is combined with the Google developer group, and it's been really successful. Everyone's really loving it. We've changed the venue this month, but that's fine. It can be it can be the thing that travels around a little bit. But we've had some really great diverse range of topics and people turn up to that. Drinks Night is the last Tuesday of this month on the 26th. NS Breakfast is first Friday of next month on the 6th. You can find CocoaHeads at these addresses. Tonight I want to highlight CocoaHeads on YouTube. We've got 102 subscribers, which is pretty good. But we need 200 to get a custom URL that's not 85 digits long. I'm putting up every presentation that I record. I've sliced it up afterwards and just published the presentation, not me talking in between, every month. So last month we had some great presentations from Vlas and Rob and Oliver. I think, Oliver, your presentation has got the 3rd most views so far. I think it could be because it's an hour long and viewable minutes. No, overall, we've got a long way to go with YouTube. We're starting there. Code of conduct. We published a code of conduct earlier this year. Again, we took some advice from the group and kind of got a few people involved to put that together. Roughly, the one-liner is that we're dedicated to providing an inclusive environment for everyone, regardless of differences. specifically added for this group was technology choices, hence our new alignment with the Google group. Everyone gets along these days. Most of it's JavaScript anyway now. Code of conduct, code-of-conduct. I could have made that one word. Maybe they both work. That's where you find it. If you feel like something is not quite right, or you've experienced something that's not in line with the code of conduct, please email codeofconduct@melbournecocoaheads.com. It comes to a few of us. Everything's kept completely confidential. You can also email me directly. There's, I think, 3 of us or 4 of us that get the code of conduct.
You can also just come and talk to Jesse too.
Yep.
Or any of us.
Yep. We take everything really seriously, and we've been lucky so far to have no serious issues. Our sponsors for this year, our major sponsor is realestate.com.au, so thanks to the team there. Our silver sponsors, again, just community members that have been around for a while: Itty Bitty Apps, Biloo, JTribe, Cognizant, and Explore. Anyone from Explore team here tonight? Welcome. You guys are upstairs as well. Yep, great. Our venue for this year is YBF Ventures. They've done a great job. Well, I think it's still work in progress, is fitting out this room. It's much better. Tonight's agenda, we're up to the second section there. Matt Delp's going to give us a bit of a talk on the dark mode that came out in Mojave. Vlasel's going to give us a talk on Marzipan, the fancy UI framework, but I think he's come down with the sickness. So we'll see how we go with timing. We've got a couple of short lightning talks up our sleeve. You may have seen me just put my ideas down in Xcode just then. And I think everyone watching learned something, so maybe I'll not in how to write code, but just something I'm doing. And then Barry's going to talk about code coverage, which I think was also a highlight this year at DubDub. I think, Barry, you updated for the latest bits and pieces?
Yes.
Good. So we're going to go around the room and do a who's hiring. So Rob's got the mic. If you want to just chuck your hand up and we'll just go around in an orderly fashion. If you want to just say who you are, where you're from, and I'll grab your details if I don't know them already, and I'll put them in the Slack channel at jobs afterwards.
Hello everyone, I'm Joe. I work at iFix. iFix is a video streaming company focusing on emerging markets. We're looking for iOS developers. Any kind of level. We need to see what would be better, but we can provide support for junior developers as well. So, if you want to have a chat, come find me.
Thanks, Joe. Also one of our sponsors as well. Thanks, guys.
It's always a good sign.
Hi, I'm Tristan. Work at JTribe. I'm remotely. JTribe does the most merge with a lot of companies to do a whole lot of different things, but they're complementary things. But some are in tech, some are in creative. We're looking for iOS and Android developers. We've got a couple of positions in both because we've got a lot more things coming up in the IoT, construction space, charity, so accountability.
Another one of our sponsors too. Awesome. Any more? Great. I'll follow up with a couple of email addresses I don't know, and I'll put them in jobs. If not tomorrow, Saturday. All right, we'll jump into presentations and take a quick 2-minute intermission while I get Matt set up. Talk about dark mode. Cool.
For audio. We good?
That's the screen meter going there,
Sorry?
That's the screen meter going.
Yeah. Seems a little bit. Yep. Cool. Hi everyone. I'm Matt. Here to talk about this fun new thing called dark mode. So we finally got dark mode, but not on iOS though. All these people that sort of love mobile devices, you'll have to wait a little bit for dark mode. Maybe September, maybe next year, we'll wait and see. So what is dark mode? Dark mode is a changing of the UI appearance to be dark. Now, pretty self-explanatory, but when I say dark, there is no meaning of just an inversion of the colors. White doesn't become black, black doesn't become white. What happens is the appearance of your app changes to a darker theme. So as a result, instead of sort of having the Chrome or the UI elements of your app being the focus, what actually becomes the focus is the content you're working on. So a lot of creatives tend to enjoy this, where they can sort of put aside all of the controls and stuff like that and just focus on what they're working on. As developers, we can do the same, where in our text editors, we will have a dark theme for all of the text, and that's pretty good. One of my favorites for Xcode was Civic from 2016, that one. Almost said 96 for some reason. Weird. So yeah, that's sort of what happens with dark mode. Now, dark mode was recently announced. It was announced last week at WWDC, and there are just a few resources available at the moment. Particularly the best resources are the WW videos themselves, so the introducing dark mode and advanced dark mode are really, really good. They contain pretty much the main set of documentation available at the moment. There's also what's new in Cocoa for Mac OS, and the HIG, which we should all be really familiar with, and I know I'm particularly not, is a really good resource. So with dark mode, a lot of it focuses on the design. So as I said before, white doesn't become black, black doesn't become white. There's a focus on the content. We're not flipping or inverting colors. And the big thing to take note of is if you use the standard macOS system controls, you will get a fairly cohesive transition to dark mode. So macOS will take care of a lot of the changes from a light appearance to a dark appearance. And it's probably also a very good idea for iOS apps at the moment, knowing that dark mode is probably highly guaranteed almost to happen. It's not guaranteed. We know that nothing is guaranteed, but if you look at, say, all of their apps like news and stuff that they've brought over from iOS to macOS, they now support a dark mode. So,
And if you actually look at the API diffs for iOS 12, the dark mode constants are there in the latest iOS beta.
yeah. Nothing is confirmed. But as I said, there is a high likelihood that it may happen. And if you use all of the standard things with AppKit or UIKit, you will likely save yourself a lot of trouble when doing the transition. So, dark mode. It's fairly easy to enable, and it is the future. You'll probably have initially a high intake of people getting dark mode going, yay, this new thing, it's fancy, it's cool, it looks edgy and stuff like that, without sort of going, is this the right thing for my app? But it's going to be there and your apps will need to support it. Now, there are ways of opting out of dark mode, but if everything else is dark in your OS and your app is this horrid thing that is just light and pretty much a stark contrast to everything, it's not going to provide a good user experience. So particularly macOS app developers need to put a lot of effort into supporting dark mode at the moment. As I said, system controls and components make it really easy. If you're doing weird custom-y stuff, then hey, you're going to have a hard time. Accent colors. So there's, as well as changing from a light appearance to a dark appearance, there's now an extended range of these things called accent colors. Now, accent colors are sort of the borders around controls or sort of the highlight color that the OS will use to show that something sort of needs action or something like that. My favorite is pink because pink is awesome and yeah, just makes everything look cool. So with accent colors, your app again needs to handle the changing between the accent colors. The macOS will take care of a lot of this for you. AppKit will handle it, but you still need to be aware that the user may in fact be changing the accent color while keeping the appearance either dark or light, which is pretty cool. The asset catalog. I'm sort of giving random bits and pieces of info here, just different bits that I found useful. So those resources at the start are the main ones that you would look at. They provide a lot more content. This is a short lightning talk. Short. It's hard for me to not talk for an hour on something. So asset catalogs. Asset catalogs now give you the option of not only specifying your main sort of appearance, but also specifying differences in colors for dark and light as well. And you can also sort of do a few other modifications in there. So the reason for using asset catalogs is it gives you a name to a particular color. So if you, say, had a title color and you wanted all of your big headings in a macOS app, don't know why you'd want to do that, to be of a particular color and handle the transition from light to dark fairly well, this is how you would do it. You would set up an asset in the asset catalogs and then either in IB or in code reference this. It's pretty cool, saves you a lot of trouble.
Hey Matt, does the asset catalog work with the accent colors as well?
Not 100% sure.
I don't think so.
No. Okay. Yeah, not sure if it works with accent colors. Yeah. Cool. Yeah.
Like if you've got a big copy of your image, icon image, for example, you want to reference that as the accent color.
Can you assign the symbolic colors to a swatch of asset catalog?
Not 100% sure.
Yeah, it's possible.
Yep. Anyway, moving on. One of the really good things that has been out in AppKit and UIKit for a while is this thing called visual effect views. So in a macOS app, typical thing is to have a sidebar, and that sidebar has a sort of semi-translucent, opaque background to it. Same with the title bar, that has a particular sort of tint and behavior to it. All of this is done through visual effect views. So at the moment in High Sierra and before, these are the particular materials you can use. Stuff like title bar, selection menu, popover, sidebar, all of the fairly standard ones. Now, the good thing is with Mojave and 10.14, you get a whole heap of new ones, which make supporting dark mode fairly straightforward, fairly easy. So with dark mode and visual effect views, those views actually switch really well between a light and a dark appearance. As long as you're using a visual effect view, you can actually have that transition fairly well. So if you say you wanted a particular view to have a solid background, you could use something like content background. Now, in a light theme, that would be a white content background. In a dark theme, it would be an almost black content background. So stuff like that makes it really, really easy to use. As I've said before, it's pretty much magic. As long as you're using Apple's standard controls, you will be able to get away with a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff will be provided for you. You don't have to make too many changes. The big thing is make sure you test it out. Make sure you jump on the betas, you download Xcode 10, and you go through the process of making sure your app behaves as you would expect. You don't have to have the most perfect dark mode design there yet, but you'll probably find stuff like if you're using a different font or a different font color, these things will start to look out of place. Backwards compatibility is something we need to think about. People don't update macOS as often as they do iOS, so hey, keep it as a consideration. Any questions? Yep. I had some fun moving that across to dark mode, found a lot of things where I was doing stuff pretty wrong. Yeah.
What kind of things did you catch that make it?
So some of, like, it was sort of things that I didn't know would transition by themselves. So using stuff like the standard text colors, they sort of transition from light to dark, whereas I was hard coding a particular background color. So it's stuff like that you need to be aware of.
Do you have to opt into dark mode, or is it automatic?
It's automatic opt-in. You have to opt out if you want.
You're about how to opt out?
No. Why would you want to opt out?
Yeah, highly specialised interface. So if you've got something which you've used for years, which is well designed, you don't want to have to design it twice. So.
Yeah, but at the same time, your app will start to look out of place. So.
What about reveal? You did your own dark mode.
We reverted from our custom dark mode a couple of years ago, and so we will be supporting dark mode. Yeah. But
That means light mode.
Well, you have a light mode now.
yeah. Yes, we have a light mode now. Yeah, we will be supporting it. Most of the light controls in reveal are just standard controls, so they'll just support it. We might have to tweak some material there and there or something, but it should just work. The main canvas area is obviously rendered by Seeker, and that doesn't honour anything to do with dark mode. And then the sidebar, we do custom render it
That's why he's not well today.
Yep.
No, Dubbo Maps, not us.
So have you actually run things on that sort of note? Have you actually run things like Final Cut and actually seen if they go light rather than dark mode?
I don't have a Final Cut, so yeah, I can't really say much about that. I assume.
Super does it, but
Yeah.
I think it's a system preference as well that you can set to have certain apps go dark and keep other ones light. Yeah, or vice versa. So yeah, if you like to find an app in dark mode but have it be in light mode, you should be able to do it.
Thank you, Matt.
Cool.
All right, so we'll just get Barry set up. So now's a great opportunity to raise the rest of the stream. We'll just get a couple of minutes.
Zima.
In your pocket.
Thank you.
Check.
Grab us a beer. Have you got a second?
Which one would you like?
Sierra Nevada, if you got it.
All right. Oh, you can just chuck it in.
Oh, yeah. A bit tight. Got new jeans and they're really tight. Do I need that?
Yep.
As well?
That's for the audio there.
Ah, right, okay.
That's just for home.
Okay. Cool. Okay, can you hear me? That sounds pretty loud. Hi everybody, I'm Barry, and I'm the tech lead for Baloo in Melbourne. Obviously we're running a bit ahead of schedule tonight, and Vlas can't make it, so I decided to expand my talk a little bit, and with the World Cup starting tomorrow, I want to talk about the visual design of the World Cup through the years. Starting with Uruguay in 1930, we'll start with the logo there. Actually, I'm going to jump ahead to my favourite logo, which is this one from Mexico in 1986. I love this logo, it's absolutely classic. Yeah, nah. I'm not going to do that. I thought that was about as far as I could push that joke. So I'll get back to the real thing. I actually want to talk about code coverage and a tool that I wrote to help interpret code coverage. So I'll go back to the start and kind of assume that no one really knows what code coverage is. So what is code coverage? Basically, ultimately code coverage is just a percentage that shows how much of your code is covered by tests. It's a useful metric to show that your tests are covering the right parts of your code, assuming you're writing tests. And it's useful to keep an eye on it to make sure the number is not falling. If you're refactoring code, things like that. It's just another tool in your toolbox. It's not it's not a thing to be worshipped. It's not a thing to pay too much attention to, but it is a useful metric. So why do we report on this? Well, like I said, just for you to keep an eye on your code, make sure you're testing the right things. Sometimes management cares about this stuff, which was the current situation that I was in, which prompted me to write this script. But it's easy to look at code coverage and say, I've got one number in mind that I want my code to be, 80% covered by tests or whatever. And I don't think that's all that useful, just as one gross number. You sort of need to dig a little bit deeper and dig into the particular areas of the code base that you want covered. Also, it's really easy to do, so you may as well. So what does it look like? In Xcode, in Xcode, it can show you code paths that you haven't tested. So for example, here, you can see that it shows in red on the right-hand side that there's an else clause here that hasn't been tested, and an exception that hasn't been tested. Sorry about the old style Xcode there. This is actually from Apple's documentation. And also in Xcode, you get built-in reporting, which shows you coverage at file and function levels, but it's not very structured. It just shows you can sort this report by percentage or by file name, which is fine if you don't have a lot of files. That might be okay, but it doesn't really give you any further view of how those files are grouped. So how do you do this? You can use Fastlane. There's a thing called Xcov in Fastlane that will output nice reports in HTML format, which is basically a nicer version of the way Xcode reports it. It's just by file and percentages. Xcov actually will also ping Slack if you wanted to, and it'll integrate with Danger, things like that. So that might be useful to you if you're in a world where you use that stuff. There are others. There's Slather, Xcode coverage, and XCCov as well. And definitely Slather can integrate with other things. I'm not sure about the other ones. Slather looks like that. Again, similar sort of thing, files and percentages. And since Xcode 7, Xcode has had the reporting built in that we saw a couple of slides ago. And again, that might be all you need. That might be fine. I'm going to digress just for a second. I found a quirk a couple of weeks ago that confused me for a few days, which now seems really silly in hindsight, but just in case you get confused by this as well. And I don't expect you to read this code. But basically, I had a bunch of tests running on a class, or a struct actually, but it wasn't appearing in the code coverage reports, like at all. There was nothing. And this confused me because I'm like, okay, they've got some tests on here. Why is it not telling me I've got tests? So you might be able to see here that this is just a really simple codable structure. It's what is it? Two properties. And the reason it wasn't appearing in the coverage report was because there's no logic in it at all. Or rather, all the logic in it is implicit. It's getters and setters, and its decoding logic is all now implicit in the definition. So I thought, I'll test that, put a bit of logic in, and suddenly it appears in the code coverage reports. But that kind of made me think, well, should I be tested? Like, do I need to test that? Or are the tests even valid for it? Like, I think they are, because I want to check that the JSON decoding of things works correctly. But if it's not appearing in the reporting, it's kind of a little bit strange to write these tests and not have any visibility of when they're failing. So that was a bit strange, and I felt really silly after, like, literally, like, I think Simon can remember this when I found out what it was. I was like, oh yeah, that's such an obvious thing to happen. So you might get caught by that. That's one drawback of Xcode. Another drawback is, like I alluded to earlier, the files, the report that you get from Xcode just shows you a list of files and percentages, and that's it. You can't really do much more with that. So in Xcode 9.3, which was about 6 months ago, I think it was January that came out, Apple gave us a way to export data from code coverage files so that we can do further analysis on it. And it's called XCCov, which, yes, there was already an open source project called XCCov. It's not related, it just happens that Apple took the name. And this does just work. Like, it works really well, actually. It's a really good little tool. And basically what it does is it takes the Xcode coverage report that Xcode generates, and it translates it into either text or JSON. And as Jesse was saying earlier, obviously we had WWDC last week. So Xcode 10 possibly gave us some new things. I got really excited when I saw this. Well, you know, a little bit excited. You can build your own automation on top of Xcode coverage reports, according to this talk at WWDC. But there was nothing in the talk that was like that. So I'm not really sure what that was referring to or what it was talking about. And so I pinged Chris Miles and said, do you know what's going on here? He hadn't heard of anything either, so I don't really know where that came from. There was some stuff in there to do with changes to how you generate the code coverage reports, but nothing about what happens after that. So as far as I can tell, there's nothing really new in Xcode 10 in terms of code coverage. There is some nice things in terms of testing, like you can group tests and you can run tests in random orders and things like that are quite cool, but not specifically to do with coverage. So essentially it's the Xcode 9.3 stuff that I'm looking at here. Okay, so how do we do this? Switch it on, checkbox at the bottom there for code coverage. You check that and you select whether you want to cover all your targets or just one target. In this case, just I selected one target. Run your tests. Every time you run tests, it generates a code coverage report. It generates a report only for the things that were in the test run. So if you run your test for one file, your code coverage report will only cover that one file. It's just something to be aware of if you've like disabled tests for your target. After your test run, you can see your tests have passed or failed in the, what's that one called? Report Navigator, I think, in Xcode. And then you go down one level on there and you get the coverage report that we saw earlier. So that's how you do it in Xcode. And like I say, that generates a code coverage report file and a code coverage archive file or folder, I'm not sure, which looks like this, the file, which is cool. Yeah, not very readable, which is why Apple invented XCCov. Well, anyway, why Apple produced XCCov. So that interprets the cov report file. Bit of a mouthful. And like I said earlier, it gives you two views, which are both readable views. So the text view will output text for you. And essentially, it's just the same stuff that you get through the Xcode report. Got two of those, and then a JSON view. But we can work with JSON, so we can script on top of that. It can also do a couple of other things. It can give you a listing of all the files that are covered by, are covered in the report, and you can dig into an individual file and look at things by function, which is where the XC-cov archive comes into it. This is how you run it. You run XC-cov, tell it you want to view, you give it where the code coverage file lives, which is usually derived data, but you can make it appear in different places, and you tell it if you want JSON or text, which is cool, but it's still not exactly what I wanted. So what I really wanted was code coverage data that was in a more simple to understand format, so sort of give me stats that I could put on management reporting on a weekly basis. So I actually take these stats and put them into a spreadsheet each week, and then they can be used in management reporting for the current client that I'm at. I only want stats for the parts of the app that I care about, which maybe sounds a bit strange. I don't care about test coverage for the whole app in my current project. I care about my models, view models, care about those a lot. Helpers and extensions, so things like, if I've got helpers on an array, I want to make sure it's not running off the end of the array, things like that. But I don't care about the view layer stuff really, because we've got a QA team taking care of that. And at my current client, I don't care about Objective-C. So currently, we're taking out an Objective-C project, translating it to Swift, and deleting all the Objective-C code. None of it's tested, and we're not going to write tests to cover the code because it's going to be deleted anyway. So I don't care about all that stuff, and obviously that's the bulk of the project. So if I just lumped all of it together and had one overall number for the test coverage of the whole project, because there's so much Objective-C, coverage would be at like 5, 6, 7%. And it's never really going to move that much. So the number looks bad, and it's not all that useful and meaningful. So that was why I wanted to get a more useful set of numbers out of this. And I wanted it to be automated and repeatable so I could do it every week. So I thought I'll write a script, which parses that JSON. So what does it do? First of all, it builds the project using Xcode build. I don't know if you can read that, but basically you give it a workspace and a scheme to run. It builds your Xcode project, generates the coverage file, then it reads the coverage file and interprets it. While it's doing the interpretation sort of phase of it, it prints out a bunch of files that it's worried about. So there's a criteria for this is if it's a model or a view model and coverage is less than, I think it's 80%, then it'll print out on this list. And then it does some aggregation. It takes the stats, smushes them together to tell you your code coverage for the project, for the app, and by file type, in this case, Objective-C, Swift, or other. And then at the end, it shows me the stats that I'm really interested in. So it groups it by model, view model, helper, other, things like that. So the code's on GitHub. If you want to have a look at the code, it'll be pretty easy to change the logic to the specifics of the project that you're working with. So obviously this is really quite heavily dependent on the setup in the current project and the naming conventions and the files and things like that, which will become more obvious in a second when I show you how it works. Now again, I don't expect you to read this. This is just to show you the kind of structure of the thing. It basically has a bunch of helpers for running shell commands, a bunch of model objects, well, 3 model objects for the different types of file or area that the app produces, and has an app file, which is essentially the script that runs you through the process. Lots of files there. That's because it was one script. It was just a big long Swift script, and then after Rob's talk last month, I decided to stick it into Swift Package Manager just to give that a try. And it was pretty good. It was pretty easy. This is how it works. It takes the JSON, it just uses decodable to interpret that JSON. This is the target structure. The project structure is similar. The file structure is basically identical to this, except it doesn't have an array of files in it. After it's decoded it, it runs through some logic, it filters some things down, and then it tries to allocate the architectural areas, which is what we saw at the final set of stats. So it breaks these down using file names. And this is the part that would be really specific to your project. So if you wanted to run this on your project, you'd have to, or you might have to change these to make sense for your naming conventions. For the current project, it looks for things called model, and it looks for view model first, and then it looks for model, and classifies files appropriately. Now, all of our files are not called model, so we don't have a thing called like user model, but the user model is in a directory called model, and this runs on the full path name, so it'll pick that up. So that's how it classifies the different files, and then it takes all that information at file level, puts it into this, which is essentially sort of a view model that takes so the analysis type is like project, file, or target, which is used for the first set of summaries. The file type is either Swift or Objective-C or other, and the architectural area is the view model, things like that. And then an array of these structures is used to spit out the stats at the end. So it's pretty simple. Like, it's a really simple little script that runs over your JSON. Obviously, it outputs just to text like that. So some next steps might be to output this as HTML to allow some customization, to pick different areas that you want to focus on. And if you want more details on it, you can get it on GitHub. Bad's got on there. And that's it. That's a quick talk. Any questions? I don't know. I haven't looked at that. Yeah, no idea. Yeah. Sorry.
More questions? Yeah.
So you mentioned that you use this report because management cares about it. Have you found ways to leverage that data to sort of feed it back into the development team and do more with it? Well, like where could you bring it in your next steps? It's like HTML support, this and that. Like, is that reasonably useful for the teams?
Currently, it's kind of two of us who are looking at it. So we kind of talk about it, and we know, I run this on a Friday morning and get the numbers and sort of go, yeah, cool, look what we did this week. We move forward. So it's kind of just like a personal talking thing at the moment. But the numbers do go into like a Google spreadsheet, which has some graphs on there about various other stats. The spreadsheet has some other stats as well, like numbers of tests and lines of code and stuff like that we're interested in as well. So there's some graphs in there that we can have a look at. Yeah, I think it's kind of like, it is quite a good motivator. It's like you can almost turn code coverage into a game a little bit sometimes and get a little bit too obsessed with pushing the number up and getting as close to 100, which isn't really the intention, but it's quite a good motivator to like, you don't want it to go down, obviously, so just keep pushing you on week by week. Yeah.
Barry, are you looking at maybe doing something in the future where you look at the trend, see maybe you run it over two sets of files or reports and get like a trend up or down, like as a management indicator here? We're going down or going up?
Yeah, so could do. Yeah, so the report, well, the spreadsheet it goes into has a bunch of graphs on it for that reason, to track it over time. So they can.
I'll sell you a subscription to SonarCube if you want. Sure.
But yeah, there's nothing automated. No.
The binary thing you showed, the raw output, is like an ASCII archive of just, so I've got a radar about that. Hopefully it's been closed, I should check. Has anyone already written things to basically convert that JSON format or one of those formats into like a standard for something like JUnit XML, which while I don't use JUnit, every CI system in the world, except maybe Xcobots, supports that format. So all those things like trend tracking and all that, as soon as you can get into a standard format in your CI,
Yeah.
basically any CI tool you sign up for will be able to generate reports and show it in your system and track it all. Have you seen any kind of standard tooling around that already?
I haven't seen anything that's using the XC curve for that. Got a feeling Slather does something like that.
Yeah, right.
Maybe.
There's a couple of tools to turn it into, is it called Duo? I can't remember what the name of it.
Callback tool.
Yeah, they'll turn that into, so that they can all the Java tools can import it to whatever.
Yeah, I think you've been able to, like, people have written tools to interpret Xcode's code coverage reporting for a while, but they were delving into the sort of the binary file format, and this just gives them an easier way to do that, I think.
Any more questions, guys?
How long do we able to hook it up to the Internet of Things devices into each developer's desk to give them a bit of a shock when they try to build it out and where it goes down rather than up?
I like your thinking. Yeah, yeah. Go into Wednesday. Yeah.
Why is management interested in this topic?
I'm going to be careful. They had a bad experience with a consultancy that said they were writing quality code, but were not. So they want to get some sort of ideas where they can sort of quantify that things are improving. It's probably the nicest way I could say it. And it's not, like, it doesn't really prove anything. Like, it's not saying the code's amazing or whatever. But at least it gives them something that they're, like, some indication that things are moving forward and getting better. Hopefully.
Cool. Any more questions? No? Thanks, Baz.
Thanks.
So we're fractionally light on tonight because unfortunately Glass was sick. I'm sure if Glass was sick, he'd still be talking from the start.
But we've got a couple of small things up our sleeve, and I don't want to take too much time, so we probably will finish early. I might jump up and just sort of show you something I had in my head for about 3 or 4 months.
Want to do break first?
And we will do a quick break now.
So we've got who's hiring chance to talk.
Yeah, quick break now for 10 minutes or so. Grab another drink, and then I think Rob and I might just sort of spend 15 minutes on a couple of small lightning talks we've got. So hang around for that if you want. A couple more beers there. See you in a second. All right, I've got something. I don't know where that's presenting to.
Guys, we need to get started again.
That's weird. Oh well, I've only got 2 slides, so you can see them both. I've got a. There's been something there's a little process I've been using in the current project I'm working on and in the previous project I'm working on, and I found it really, really handy. And we've done talks before. Is Stu still here? Stu's still here. Stu, you've done a talk before on toggles. I think this is complementary to that. It's not covering, I think, anything that you've spoken about before. 100%, 95% of this credit goes to Tony Arnold because he's an old school Mac developer and they know things like this that us iOS first people don't get. That's all there is. That's all there is.
No, that's a lie.
I'm actually not, I'm not, there's only one screen. We can all see it together. My escape key doesn't work. I think I'll caps lock. So, no, I've got caps lock. I got caps lock. So,
Jesse, can you plus?
Yep. Oh, that doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. All right.
This is already plussed. So,
Plus some more.
oh, okay, hold on, we'll get there. I'm running Xcode beta because it works, as I said. I'm also writing. It's not dark. I'm not running Mojave yet. So the point of this is to show you a really quick way to do toggles, and in particular runtime toggles. So I know everyone knows the concept of a toggle. It's something that maybe you need on for a certain build or a QA build or a development just in the simulator. So this app starts very, very simply. This is all it is. New project. I'm going to set the background color to my view to red. So what would be one way to have that exist in a toggle? The simplest way is, oh, that's not going to work. Yes. The simplest way would be to create a, see, it doesn't update the file list straight away. I've got to quit Xcode and open it again. I noticed that before. That's okay. See, it's there now. It's there on the left. So the quickest way would be to add a Swift struct that has a static var that's, should I make the background blue? I think that's the similar gist to what we were talking about, that Stu was talking about ages ago. And then you check that in your view did load or wherever. View did load's actually probably the best spot for that. So it should make background blue. Okay. At the moment, though, it's always true. That's not that handy. But you can see there that that's where you would switch that logic. The second stage from here, to make it a bit less not the code that you've got here, would be to create a compile time condition. So this is where you can have one of those if macro things in there. So for example, I normally don't edit the Xcode project directly, but this ends up the same thing. You can add another thing here. So we're just in debug, and I call this, make BG blue. Capital, it doesn't have to be capitals. It can be anything you like. So that adds there, and that will end up in the being there for compile time. So in your toggle here, instead of just returning true, you can go, if what I sort of make BG blue, else, and then you end up with. Wait, what? It works?
It does, but there's no if-else branch.
Yeah. No else branch.
Oh, well, I mean, if not, okay, the other side is yeah, I mean, right? So return false. Okay, fair enough.
Lots of edits in this room, remember.
So true. So if I remove that from here, and that property is called active compilation conditions, I found it by just typing Swift in the top right, because I forget what it's called. It's the one that has debug in it by default. So if I don't put this here, you can see. Oh, hold on, I have to commit it. Right. It's red, right? So there's your switch, right? Now, there's one more layer that's a little bit more interesting than that, and that would be, I don't want to change my config every time I just want to see something change in the code, change on the screen. So you can then take this, I'm just going to put my Git forward. Uh-oh. Hold on. I do more live Git coding than anything. So I'm back here, yeah, toggle background blue, return true, return false. Another way to do it would be to inject that toggle at runtime. So you can be clever there, and you can go into your scheme, and that's what these runtime toggles are, these arguments passed on launch. It's a little bit difficult to see, but the idea is that you can pass a runtime variable, you have to put a dash there, and then you still sort of do the same sort of thing. It can be uppercase, lowercase, whatever you like. Toggle BG blue, I've just changed my pattern to use camel case with the first letter uppercase. And then you have to give it, it's like key value. So the value has to be 1 or truthy, it's like JavaScript. True, I use true and false. I think 1 and 0 work as well, but your mileage may vary. So from here, you go, okay, that's great. How do I get that in my code? Well, it's really, really simple. You can just create an, well, there's a few ways you can do it, but I create an extension on user defaults. Let me, hold on, we'll get there, hold on. And we can create a variable called make BG blue that turns a Boolean, and then inside you just return self. There's a new Xcode 10 scroll across the bottom, past the bottom thing, super handy. I've got that on.
The author of that feature in the room.
It's good, Sam. It's good.
Why did it take so long?
Hold on. The point is it's there.
You're busy working on a multi-cursor support.
So I find myself in multi-cursor all the time. I'm not sure how. I'm deleting something from, anyway. Make BG blue returns a Boolean, and then it's self-bool for key. And the key that I give it is that value I put between the dash and the true. And that will return a Boolean. I've got to hit return. And that gives make BG blue. So instead of this here, you might want to inject your defaults, blah, blah. Actually, no, you don't, because it ends up in standard user defaults. So you go user defaults standard make BG blue, and you return that. And that gives you the same effect. So the background should be blue, because I've set a runtime parameter in my scheme. And then if I change, or if I just don't set it, the default value for bool for key is false. So you don't have to worry about whether you set them true or false, but the fork happens there. And I find that's something that not a lot of people know. You can go and set toggles, flags, things, and override values through the runtime there. It's also super handy if you register defaults through some other method. So say you've got a plist full of endpoints, key value endpoints. You can register that plist at the start of your app, and then you can actually overload that at runtime. So user defaults, no matter what the key is, you can set that at runtime through a scheme. And what's really handy about this is you can just go manage schemes, and you can go grab your scheme and duplicate it, and you can have, you can have one scheme that's like, debug feature A, and that's got that on, and then you don't even have to worry about the value in your shared project, in the project you commit to GitHub and the things you do upstream. Keep this value here, but keep it off, and then you can. I think I've got so you share the main scheme, and you can have all your tags or toggles in there that happen at runtime, and then just for locally, which doesn't end up in your Git history or your unchanged files, have your own copy of that scheme uncommitted. If you want to take it, the logical next step is to combine all two things together to my step 4 scheme toggle. Ugh. And, oh no, hold on, it's step 5. We're on step 4. And you do both. So if you want to toggle it on, then we take the hardline version is the one that's compiled in. That's true. Otherwise, defer to the user defaults. And the defaults default to false. So they're always off unless you say otherwise. This is cool because the reason that this works is in my final slide. It's at this URL. And it is, it's buried in here as into how the preferences of the user default system. And the wording is that they come, anyway, basically there's a hierarchy, the search order for domains. So this is bottom up, but pretty much if you add something yourself, I think it ends up here. The application does registered default value. But if you have something in the argument domain which comes from the launch arguments, it will override that. So I don't know what the other domains mean. I only think iOS really handles the top two. But when I saw it work from Tony, I'm like, that's really cool. I went digging for the documentation to make sure that it's a feature and not a bug, and it works really well. So yeah, it's great. There's heaps of ways you can use it. Use it for, say you just want to, the biggest use I use it for at the moment is I've got a new screen that I'm developing. So I put a flag somewhere in my startup routine that jumps straight to that screen so I don't have to click through things. But that's it. Any questions?
Not a question, but an extension point to this is settings bundles. So all the preferences or user defaults that come in. So the registration domain is at the bottom, which is in that table on that webpage.
Yes.
Which is the domains that you that's the preferences you register with registered defaults.
Oh, that's at the bottom.
That's the registration domain.
Cool.
I'm not sure if it's the bundle domain or not, but I think the settings bundles exposes preferences as well. So if you create a settings bundle in your app and you put keys in there for your user defaults,
yep.
and you give it toggle switches or whatever, they can be, they will be available basically as preferences as user defaults.
Do you know what layer they are?
I think it's the bottom line, so it comes in before the arguments.
Yep.
So by using this system, by making use of its user defaults, you can put in default values in the registration domain for your app. You can then provide a user interface to your testing team or whatever through the settings model, so they can just go into the settings and change toggles, relaunch the app, and have different behavior. And then as a developer, you can override that using arguments to the scheme of the execution of it. And you can also do that in tests as well. So if you, when you're UI testing, you can pass arguments to the launching app, UI tests to provide or expose features or whatever.
The XCUI test stuff that lets you just, because you basically launch the application, you pass the arguments there, it actually makes that just as useful. Yep.
So it's super useful for other things as well, like you want to have an ability to delete all keychain elements or something. You can have a toggle in your settings bundle so the next launch delete keychain, or you can do that through UI tests, or if you want UI tests or particular mocks of it, you can pass it over through the command line. Avoiding all the annoyance of setting up separate configurations.
Yep. Cool.
Question? Yep.
So how does that, it looks good for toggling a single feature. How does it work with multiple features if you sort of want a more complex like A, C, and Z on?
I mean, that's that next layer. I mean, this gives you that set a Boolean here. That's up to the reader, I reckon. If you, I mean, you could create your own layers that this value. I don't know. That's up to.
Usual when it's user default, you can probably just go get string from that.
Yeah.
And it'll just return true.
Yeah. There's.
Yeah, so if you want to pass in, like for a combinatorial set of features, you could have just multiple feature flags as different arguments. Just add new lines into the argument editor in the scheme.
Yep.
Or if you had some special, like this combination of features is named Woolly Bear or something, you can pass that as an argument or something.
Thanks for listening. Cool. Yep. Thanks, guys. All right, we'll swap over super quickly to Rob, and we'll be out of here in about 10 minutes or so. Yeah?
Yep.
You use it on your phone? Wow.
Yep.
Fancy.
No, this is a backup presentation, so they tend to be pretty basic.
AWS beginners?
Yeah, something like that.
Oh no, that's not how you do it anymore.
All right. In my pocket.
In the pocket.
So, sorry, Sean, this was my lunch and learn presentation for next week that was cancelled, so. How do we do this again?
I don't know.
Oh, right. Screen mirroring button.
Yeah. 38. Postcode.
It is a postcode. Awesome. All right, so a couple of months ago, I published a small library to GitHub, and I just realized that the URL is not in my slide deck, so that's very helpful. It's all about view styling. This is a common problem that we all have, how best you style your views. So, read this blog post by Marin. It's all about view styling. I'm going to give away the punchline if I read too fast. I have tweeted this link before, and I will publish the link to both Twitter and Slack at the end of this. So, what Marin postulated, there's a lot of different approaches to styling views. Most common is that people will drop in a struct, and then you set some property on the struct, and then you apply that. That's really difficult to maintain, keep current. So this really needs to be quick, easy to create. They need to be reusable, can be declared in a single place, so they're not spread throughout your file. Need to be inherited, so you don't have to do copy and paste the same styles over and over again, because that defeats the purpose. Should be type safe. I'm going to hold this so I can read my notes. Should be composable. That's a good one. And one at the bottom, for an app that I'm currently building, it needs to support 7 venues. It's universal, and it needs to support an in-house configuration and an app store configuration. So I've got 27 different targets to hit. Minimum 27 different targets. So it's a bit difficult.
It used to be 400 view controllers, now it's 27.
No, that's a different app. I already gave that talk 2 years ago. Still haven't finished that app. No. So the solution that Marin found to this is functions. Functions are composable, they're reusable, and they overwrite the previous function invocation. So as a really basic example, and the rest of this slide deck is just examples of the library that I published, framework. We apply a function, and all it is that the closure takes a single argument, which is the input view. Set whatever you want on it. That's it. Really basic. Yes, it's really open to abuse, but then again, everything we do is, so, yeah.
It's not Objective-C.
Remember the code of conduct, Matt. Technology choices. Cool. And if you want to save it, you just save the closure. It really is, the view style is just a struct that's just a wrapper around that function. Very, very basic. And you can apply it with, passing it in. And best part about that is you can separate them. So you can throw your styles into its own group, project folder, whatever you want to do. Keep it away from your actual implementation. But after using this on my project for about a week, I realized that I was typing the same thing over and over, the declaration of the type with this generic. So many times, it's like a dozen times in a single style. And I was like, well, that kind of defeats the purpose if I have to type so much. And so, type aliases are awesome. We can now just, there's a style type alias on there, and a static func, so it comes down a lot. Cuts out a lot of the duplicate. Shout out if there are any questions as we go. So the main reason that this was built is so that I could put in different conditionals, so that the closure itself was only applied if and when the conditions match. So in this case, if it's an iPad-sized device, and the horizontal size class is regular. Same might work better for people with buttons. So you just apply it to the button when it's disabled. Pretty basic. So literally the view style struct is just a wrapper that stores some conditions and a closure to be called. But it's cool. It's actually really extensible. All you need to do is extend the viewStyle.condition, add in your own static func that returns a viewStyle.condition. So this one is a test that I did that changes the style based on whether it's the simulator, whether it's a debug build on device, whether it's test flight, or whether it's App Store. There's no warranty around that because that's why the code's not there. But so the other part was that it's composable. So there's a static func called compose, and it just takes a variadic of the different styles. So again, my usual pattern for this has been a common set of base styles, and then any overrides that I have for different device classes or venues or whatever the case might be. Cool. So that's last example. So it's just keeping the common style separate from everything else. So that means that for your submit button, when you apply the submit button style, it inherits from all buttons and then just applies the specific one. That's it. Any questions? I can't run my own mic. You should. You might have to turn it on, Matt.
So how does your library work with accessibility?
That's up to you. We make no opinions about that. You also use it for accessibility if you like. No? Cool. Easy.
Tweet out the URL.
Yes, I'll do that now.
How the repo you've got, how big is the framework?
It's like 30 lines.
Yeah, so it's
Pretty lightweight, yeah. I think the bulk of it is actually doing the conditions, just actually specifying the conditions.
like a CocoaHead.
No. No, it doesn't even.
30 lines of code is just.
Yeah. It should be just a gist, yeah. But it's there, so I think there's actually more in the README than there is in the actual code itself. And the README is mostly that presentation, so just with some more details.
I mean, technically, what you've done isn't specific to style. You're applying a function to an object. Like,
Yep.
it's literally just a function. Like the
Yeah.
full sample functional program.
If it was presented as like functional programming, everyone would fall asleep. Sorry, that's probably not good for the coding roadmap.
No, probably not.
Burritos.
Thanks, Rob.
Cool.
recap on our next set of events. Thanks for coming. Thanks for hanging around. I think it's lots of fun doing a couple of short lightning talks at the end. Look, lightning talks don't have to be much. They can be just an idea you've had in 10 minutes to put together a couple of badly composed Git commits like I did, or some nice slides based on a GitHub repo you've got. So I try and encourage people as much as I can. It doesn't have to be a big deal, and I understand it's quite easy for Rob and I to stand up here because we run the meetup. But on the
Still not easy.
sorry, I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon. Yeah, anytime you've got something you want to say, it's open for anything.
Some of the talks that I really enjoy is you found a cool tool that we might not know about.
And sometimes it could be your own tool that's cool. That we get. Sorry?
Can we do another review?
They are sponsors.
So next hack night is next Wednesday night. It's at IBM. The details are up to date on at least meetup.com. I think I updated the website.
So this is IBM at Southampton?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, level 20 and the South.
I think they've got heaps of space. So next drinks night is the end of the month, the 26th at the Mill House. Next breakfast is on July 6th at Higher Ground. I think they're both on meetup.com. I think at least the breakfast is. Our next drinks night there. Yep. Next meetup is back here July 12th at 6 o'clock. Based on my organisation, which can be hold on. In the spirit of openness, where is my organisation deck? This Trello app's really native, as you can tell. Where is my presentations? Next month, I think we've got July. Prasanna from REA has put his hand up to do a talk about architecture for scaling mobile. And then August, we've got Audrey lined up. She's talking about Apple ML. She's speaking at TriSwift New York as well. So we've got space next month. I think probably Vlas will be well by next month, and he'll probably do a talk on the marzipan stuff. I might put that there, see how good this is. There you go. So yeah, we've got spots next month. If something's tweaked your mind, Sam, if you're still around. No. A few of us might run to the pub, Irish Times. We'd normally just pack up and put stuff on my trolley, and then a few of us tend to head there. If you want to hang around for that, everyone's welcome. There's normally not many people there by the time we get there. Thanks for coming. See you next month.
Just pick up any empty beer bottles on the ground too as you go.
Oh, you just put the rubbish that direction.